Well, hello and welcome back to In the Word. Happy to be back. Happy to be back in our Thursday study in the book of Revelation. Been gone for several weeks, maybe 6 weeks or more. Been since chapter 16. I've been on kind of a long trip and then came home and had a long trip, came home, went on a long trip, came back, and now I'm getting ready to go on another trip over Christmas. So I thought I'd get another chapter in while I'm still here. Looking forward to next year. We'll be starting a new series. I'll surprise you in January, but a new series. I'm really looking forward to it and be a little different from what we've done in the past. But I think you'll like it. I think you'll enjoy it. So that is going to be our In the Word series. As you recall, we have kind of three components to the ministry here. One is kind of a short 15 minutes or so, few times a week to keep you in the Word. We've gone through the major prophets, the minor prophets. We've gone through briefly the life of Christ, and we've gone through big portions of the Bible. So we'll continue that portion, 15 minutes or so, a couple times a week into 2025. Then Revelation, we're doing this year as a regular weekly Bible study. And then I do periodic topical sort of videos that I think would help you. You know, my goal is to keep you in the Word, I guess, keep you in the Bible. That's really my passion. I want to educate you, so the more you are familiar with the Lord through His Word, the more stable and steadfast Christian you'll be. Edify you, that is, build you up spiritually, and encourage you. Don't we all need encouragement? I know I do. So that's my goal with the ministry here. So we're back in Revelation. We're in chapter 17. Kind of a prelude before we get into this. This is chapter 17 and 18. A lot of confusion about this. You'll see lots and lots of, I think a lot of people get it wrong personally. A lot of people are just use these chapters as a way to use their imagination. And I think we need to be bound to the Word. So that's what we're doing here. Also, there's other Bible teachers online. I'm sure you know that. If you want to go into more in depth, what I'm trying to do is hit about a chapter every session. So I think that's a good, I hate to use the word compromise, but I think it's a good balance between getting into details and remaining and getting the big picture of the book of Revelation. It's kind of my goal is to give you the big picture and present it in kind of an understandable way so that when you go back in more in-depth studies, or we might do that, you have a framework that you can fit everything in so you can see how it's developing. For example, a Bible teacher I really respect, don't agree with him on everything, certainly, but really respect him is Andy Woods. He's got a great ministry. He's the pastor of Sugarland Bible Church. Got a great online ministry. Makes all his material available for free. He spends 5 weeks, five sermons, about 6.5, almost 7 hours, just on chapter 17. Really in depth. I think if you want an in-depth view, he's your guy. Maybe me in the future, but he's your guy right now. But again, that kind of teaching sometimes causes me to kind of lose the forest for the trees, miss the big picture, misunderstand what the author is trying to tell us. So this is my approach. Hopefully it works for you as well. Also, my daughter here in Colorado is going through Revelation with BSF, and I know they take a very slow approach as well. So perhaps you're in that BSF study someplace in the country and wondering how this all fits together. So this would be a good supplement to that, I think, a good supplement to the BSF study to help you pull everything together. And I know my daughter listens to this sometimes, and it surprises her young children. They hear me talking, but they don't see me anywhere in the house. And she's told me they've looked for me as she's listened to me, and I think that's kind of funny. But hello to Levi, Ivy, Ezra, and Judah if they're listening. So, well, let's get into it. Enough about my views. Let's get into the book of Revelation here. We're in chapter 17, and it's helpful if I can move the slide along here. Get your Bible out. Follow along with me in this chapter, just to remind you where we're at in the book. Again, trying to keep the big picture. In the middle there is chapters 1 through 22. That's what that line of numbers indicates. In the upper left-hand corner, we're in the last part of the book, which is the things to come. And we'll look into this a little bit more detail here, but we're in the tribulation period. Now, the book itself, the 22 chapters are divided up into, again, what we've looked at up here before is the things which are, the things which you have seen, the things which are, and the things which are to come. So that's how the book is divided up. The things which are, we're in chapter 1. The things which you have seen are in chapter 1. The things that are in chapters 2 and 3, and that's where we discussed those 7 churches that were existing at the time. Chapters 4 and 5, we have a kind of a heavenly interlude. We're introduced to the judge, which is, of course, God and Jesus, the Lamb. And then we're back on earth, and we see the first judgments poured out, sealed judgments there in chapter 6. And then another interlude in heaven where we're introduced to the 144,000 and a great multitude in heaven. And again, if you need a review on those, you can go back in my YouTube channel in the playlist for Revelation and go look at those. And we've had the trumpet judgments, the second round of judgments in chapters 8 and 9. And then another kind of long heavenly interlude, chapters 10 through 15. And then in chapter 16, we saw a very rapid succession of judgments being poured out on the earth. In chapters 17 and 18 now, that's where we're going to be today. Here you are. We're going to be moving into this discussion about a particular specific judgment, not an additional judgment, but we're looking at the judgment of Babylon that's poured out as part of those final bowl judgments. We divide these 2 chapters up into chapter 17 and 18. Chapter 17 is looking at Babylon as a religious system. Chapter 18, Babylon as a economic system is what we're looking at. I just wanted to point out that the shift is really, focusing in at this point on the 7th bowl judgment and the end of Revelation 16, and it focuses in on Babylon the Great. Babylon the Great was remembered before God to give her the cup of the wine of his fierce wrath. So we've got this worldwide judgment that's happening during the tribulation. And at the end of chapter 16, it's as if we're watching a movie and it focuses in on this one city. The director of the movie now zooms in, and the focus in these 2 chapters are on 17, and chapter 17 and 18 are on the city of Babylon. Question comes up, and we'll talk about this a little bit here. Is this literal or symbolic? And the answer is yes. I'm going to be a good, almost like a politician here, and we'll talk out of both sides of my mouth, so to speak. It is a literal city. We'll show you that in a minute here. It's being and will be rebuilt. So it's in the process of being rebuilt now, and it will be rebuilt according to the Bible. So the Bible's anticipating that. It's also a literal city that represents something. Now, this shouldn't make our heads hurt too much. We talk about, for example, New York and Wall Street, and it stands for the economic power of the United States. That's what those two references are usually for. We're talking about a literal place, a literal city, but it has a representative or a symbolic meaning. White House stands, of course, for the U.S. political power, or we look at look to Rome, or the Vatican stands for Roman Catholic religious power. So again, these are all literal places somewhere. You can point your finger to them on a map. You can go visit them. There are places in the world, but they also represent something. So sometimes I get accused, or people like me get accused of being what they call a wooden literalist when it comes to the Bible. So I'd say, in other words, when we come to something that's symbolic, we try to make it literal. But clearly, and as we walk through this chapter, you'll see that this is clearly symbolic, but the symbols are interpreted for us. The Bible doesn't leave us to our own imagination, but it directs us and teaches us what it means. I guess I should switch over to my slides here. There we go. So Babylon is this literal place that represents these economic and religious powers that are arrayed against the God of the Bible, but more specifically, the against Jesus, the second person of the Trinity, preventing him, opposing him as he brings his kingdom to the earth, which is what the book of Revelation is about. Let's go on here. So again, Babylon is a real place. If you look at a map, as I'm showing you here, we have Baghdad. There's a Baghdad governorate, kind of a province. That's what this is. And the purple here is the Baghdad province, we could say, or the Babylonian province in Iraq. And in the middle of that Babylonian province is this significant city in the Bible, very significant city marked by the number 1 there of Babylon. I'm going to show you a video here. Sometimes it's a little difficult to hear, so you might want to turn up your volume, and I'm going to move my microphone here so it can pick up the sound. But here's a literal city, and this is a video showing you that city is actually being rebuilt.
Talking a minute ago about the rebuilding that happened several times in antiquity, but there's recent rebuilding by Saddam Hussein, who saw himself as an heir to Nebuchadnezzar, the 6th century ruler of Babylon. And then there have been restoration efforts that have gone on in the 20th century since the discovery of the location of Babylon.
Well, I think Babylon has a history like many sites in Europe and the Middle East. It was excavated at the end of the 19th century, spilling into the early 20th century. Then, because of World War I, excavation activity stopped. Then between the wars, it resumed a little bit again. And then there was quite a bit of activity in the 50s and 60s. Then in the 1970s and 80s was when there were a lot of reconstructions and a lot of restoration efforts on the site. One of the things that you can see if you look at before and after images, so there's the palace, which we can see what it looked like in the 1920s and 30s. And then you see in the 1980s that what were ragged footprints of buildings have now all been made very uniform. And so that's a little bit of a concern to understand exactly how the reconstruction was undertaken.
And so some concern that the restorations that happened and the rebuilding that happened under Hussein were not undertaken with the kind of scientific archaeology that would be ideal.
So again, the point here is that this is a literal place. This is a real city that exists today. It's in the process, it's in the process of being rebuilt now. It's a UN World Heritage Site. You could Google Babylon and see about the reconstruction that's going on there. And I know from other articles I've read, and there's several books about Babylon. Again, Andy Woods has a great book called Babylon, the Bookends of History, traces Babylon through the Bible. Mark Hitchcock has a book about the rebirth of Babylon, as does Ron Rhodes, if you want to dig into this. But lots of discussion about bringing business there, be a world business center. It's always been, since the Tower of Babel, a alternative, a new world order based not on the Lord, but on the apostate and idolatrous notions of men. Long history. I've got a lot of commentaries on the book of Revelation, and you go through those commentaries and you see a lot of allegorical or symbolic interpretations of the city or what this is. People, again, they use their imaginations rather than look closely at what the word says, which is what we're going to do. But this slide here shows you just a variety of different symbolic interpretations that have been advanced, explaining what Babylon talks about. But we're going to stick with what the Bible says. We're going to stick with what's literal written here. And why is that? Why are we going to take a literal interpretation? Well, I think there's several good reasons. Number one is if we just look at the book of Revelation, the locations are always literal. I mean, they are always literal in the book of Revelation. So this would be, in the context of the book itself, unusual, unexpected. And we look at the Bible as a whole. There's 294 references to Babylon in the Bible. They're literal. They're talking about a particular city, even if it's used in the context of a symbol like we see here. The referent is always a literal city, right? In Revelation, Babylon's associated with other definite places like the Euphrates River. And then when we look at the prophetic landscape, and I'll show you this shortly, I won't spend a lot of time on it, that'd be maybe a different video, but Jeremiah 50 and 51 and Zechariah chapter 5 are prophecies about what's going to happen to the literal city of Babylon from the Old Testament. And there's a whole list, I'll show you here in a second, whole list of parallels between what Jeremiah and Zechariah anticipated for the city of Babylon and what Revelation says is going to happen to Babylon. So here's an example. I'll leave it up for a second. You might want to take a screenshot of that. I'm not going to walk through it. Kind of a noisy slide, but you get the point. I'm trying to make the point that there are parallels between what the prophets predicted and what Revelation is saying. And that's, as we've said, Revelation is how all these prophecies come together. Here's Zechariah. And again, Arthur Pink here, quoting him from the Antichrist. The vision or prophecy contains basically the gem, which is afterward expanded and developed in such detail in Revelation 17 and 18. So what he's saying here is the prophecy is the seed, and that seed grows into what happens in Revelation 17 and 18, where it is shown that the house, which is established for the system of commerce, is Babylon the Great. So this is Arthur Pink's view. And again, the reason why we take this literal, the Bible seems to use it literally, so we want to respect that and do the same thing. Now, what I'm going to do for the next several slides, there's a lot of characters involved, a lot of people involved in this book of Revelation, these two chapters of Revelation. And first I want to show you in a summary way what the main characters are, how they're being depicted. And then we'll walk through the chapter verse by verse like we usually do. So what we're going to encounter is we're going to encounter the woman. She's going to be described as a great prostitute seated on many waters. And again, a visual symbolism that is interpreted for us right in this book, right in this chapter. It tells us that the waters represent the peoples of the earth. She's sitting on a scarlet seven-headed beast, which represents 7 mountains and 7 kings. And that beast is ultimately going to turn and destroy the woman. So she's riding it at first, but that beast is going to turn on her. The woman is going to be clothed in purple and red and adorned with jewels and gold. So she looks regal, right? She looks important. She looks exalted. And she's labeled Babylon the Great, also called the mother of harlots, not a nickname that you want. Also, mother of abominations of the earth, also not a nickname that you necessarily want. And she's Babylon. She represents Babylon, who rules the earthly earthly kings, and she's drunk with the blood of the faithful. So that's the woman that we're going to be seeing in this chapter. It's kind of a summary, helps you navigate. Next thing we see is the beast, right? The devil himself. The beast is scarlet. He's bloody. The woman is regal. She's in purple, but behind that is this bloody beast that the Babylonian woman is sitting on. Carries the woman, controls the 7 heads, controls the 10 horns. The heads are interpreted for us. Mountains represent kings. 5 of the 7 are in the past. 1 king exists. 1 is coming and will reign for a short time. There's 10 horns. They are also 10 kings. They're going to be united and will serve the beast for just a short time. And they will resist the coming of Jesus. They were going to oppose him, but ultimately be defeated. And it destroys the religious system when he destroys the religious system against him. And again, this is going to be binding together chapters 16, 17, 18, and 19. So these 4 chapters are really the culmination of what Jesus has been talking about through the book of Revelation. Back to the beast here. He used to exist. He formerly existed. Does not exist at the time of the vision. So John is getting a vision here. But will return from hell and will go to destruction. That's what this chapter is telling us. And will be this final ruler is going to emerge from these 7 kings of the earth. The revival will stun those who not elect. So unbelievers will be stunned by his return. And again, he is like the woman, drunk with the blood of the faithful. So he is opposing God in all that he's trying to do. Another character, we can call it, is the 10 horns, right? So the 10 horns, as we said, are under the control of the beast. The angel is going to identify who they are and that they represent 10 kings who have yet to come and who will receive their authority from the beast. So this is going to be a group of leaders, a group of 10 kings who are going to be empowered and enabled by Satan to attempt to keep the kingdom from coming to the earth. They'll be united and oppose Jesus's return. They're going to turn and attack Babylon itself. And there be very interesting when we get to the end of the chapter, because what they're doing, their intention to band together, their intention to serve the beast, they're freely making these determinations. They are freely choosing to do this, but they are also being directed by God. Reminds me of the Assyrians and in I think Isaiah chapter 10, where they are God's instrument of judgment against his own people. But the Assyrians don't know that. All they are doing is pursuing their bloodthirsty ends. And that's what we'll see here. God works through even evil men. And finally, the 7 heads. So we have the woman, the beast, the 10 kings and the 7 heads. Again, the kings and the heads all under the control of the beast. Their identity, who these heads are explained in the chapter itself, so we don't have to be wondering who they are. 5 of the 7 kings are gone. 1 king reigns. There's a 7th that's coming. And when the 7th comes, he's going to remain for just a little while. So his days are limited, his days are numbered. And the beast is an eighth king that emerges from the seven. So we'll see this as we go through here. Here's how I've divided up the chapter. I find it's easy to put it into bite-sized pieces so we can take a section at a time. And this might be convenient for you. You know, some of these videos go about an hour, and I know finding an hour in a hectic day is hard. So perhaps this is a good way for you to divide it up. And if you look in the description below this video, you'll see a table of contents, and you'll be able to jump to each section directly. So let's go. Verse 1. Then one of the seven angels who had the seven bowls came and spoke with me. So again, as I've been saying, the seventh angel here and the seven bowls is kind of a link between chapter 16 and chapter 17 through 19. It links these final judgments and how these judgments are the final stage, really, of Jesus bringing his kingdom to the earth. And it's really the answer to the prayers of the disciples, Jesus's followers. Jesus taught them to pray that your kingdom come, your will be done in Matthew 6:10. That's exactly what's happening here. That prayer is being answered. It's being answered after over 2,000 plus years. But we can rest assured that the Lord is sovereign, and he will bring that to pass ultimately. He says, "Come here, I will show you the judgment of the great harlot who sits on many waters." So what this is doing is showing John a specific aspect of the judgment from the bowls, the judgment of the great harlot who sits on many waters. Remember the context here. This is important to do that, to stop once in a while. Remember, this is a letter that's going from the island of Patmos to seven churches in Asia Minor. They're getting the whole book of Revelation, not just chapters 2 and 3, because the whole book is one book. We've demonstrated that earlier in the introduction. But the message is coming from to these churches, and it's really a message of hope. It's a message of hope for them to hang on, don't give up. Remember what he told the church in Philadelphia, I'm coming soon. That is, he could come at any time. And the message, as much as a hope for us as it was for them at the time. He says, calls her a harlot. I don't have to go into the details of what that means. But throughout the Bible, in the prophets particularly, harlot may refer to a literal harlot, like Gomer, for example, the wife of Hosea. But it generally has a figurative connotation of those who unite themselves with another god. It's as if they are one flesh with that God as far as God's concerned. And it's mentioned several times, chapter 17 and 19, again, binds these chapters together. It says the harlot sits on many waters. So verse 15 is going to tell us that these waters are the people and multitude and nations and tongues. So these are Gentile peoples, is what the water is. And this is a good illustration of how the book of Revelation almost always interprets its own symbols. It's important to take note of that because, again, so many people come to the book of Revelation and they call it apocalyptic, or they call it visionary, or anything but prophetic, and they bring their imagination to bear on the book rather than allowing the book to speak to them directly. And this is an example of that. The waters, which you saw the harlot sits. So she's sitting on the beast, and the beast is on the waters. And the idea here is that she is leading them astray. She's leading them and guiding them. Verse 2, the kings of the earth, with whom the kings of the earth committed acts of immorality. So this, in contrast with Jesus, whose kingdom is not of this earth, These kings are exercising a broad range of power, religious, economic, military, to establish and keep kingdoms on the earth. What they're interested in is their own power and continuing in that power and extending that power. And when someone comes along and wants to take that power from them or wants to conquer them and usurp them, they're going to resist. So that's what kings of the earth do. What they've done here is they've committed these acts of immorality. Porneia is the word here, sexual immorality, and that's one of the great ways that Satan uses to mislead and compromise and even bring shame upon the church. We've seen this past year, if you look at 2024 by itself, we've seen some really outstanding, apparently outstanding men of God, men like Tony Evans and Steve Lawson and others of megachurch fame fall to various forms of sexual immorality and sometimes of the grossest sort with children or with other men. And it really discredits their ministry and also brings shame on Christ and us who are called Christians. So these acts of immorality are one of the key ways that the kings of the earth are controlled, literally, acts of immorality, by this woman. And I think it's also points to not just that specific act, but her whole influence, this evil influence that really erupts from hell and is brought to the earth from beginning in the Bible, from Babel, and spreads across the whole earth and all the kings of the earth. So we see this overflowing talked about here at the end of the book of Revelation. It's going to come to its climax, I guess we could say. John says in verses 3 and 4 that he is in the Spirit. He's carried me away in the Spirit into the wilderness. And he sees the woman sitting on a scarlet beast full of blasphemous names, having 7 heads and 10 horns. So this is a supernatural revelation. That's what he's telling us here. When he says he's carried away in the Spirit, this is God's supernatural revelation, which he's recording, right? I mean, you go back to chapters 1 and 4 and 21 ahead. John's recording this. He's got to be told sometimes, write this down. This beast that he sees is the same beast from Revelation 13:1. This beast is drenched in blood. This is the Antichrist. This is what we see throughout the Bible, the lawless one who claims to be God. He's at this time that we're speaking, he's restrained, but he's destined to be loosed and destined to be destroyed. And he's empowered by Satan himself and accompanied by false signs and wonders. And this will be the last in a series of antichrists. So that's what John is seeing here when he sees this beast, this cup full of abomination and unclean things. What to focus in on is that word cup, the gold cup. What it's holding here is evidence. Evidence against the rebellion of this woman and the beast and these kings and the world. Evidence of this rebellion. We can look at it. You know, a cup is usually full of wine. This is abomination and unclean things. And it's the fruit, I think, of the whole world system that has rejected God. Again, and here in Revelation chapter 17, we're looking at a religious system. But in chapter 18, we'll be looking at an economic system. But the trust or the desire of Satan from the beginning is to create a world system that excludes God, a world system that we live in today, brothers and sisters, that encourages us to do without the Lord. So in 2 Corinthians 4:4, we find that the Satan is the god of this world, he's called there. In Galatians 1:4, we find we're in an evil age. This is what he's talking about here. This is the age of Babylon. Babylon the Great, this woman clothed, the scarlet beast she's riding on, the nations that she's over. This is the time we live in today. This is why we have to be so careful and so cautious, because the world is offering us a way of life, a world system, what John calls in Greek a cosmos, a whole system that drives us, pries us away from God, and we don't even need him. In verse 5, we see on her head was a name, was written, a mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of prostitutes. So again, people come to this word mystery and they jump right in and start calling this is invitation to a mystical Babylon, or a symbolic, or an allegorical, and they use it as a way to give license to their imagination here. But what he means by that is actually explained in verse 7. I'm going to get into a little detail here, so strap in. There's different ways that this is translated. I don't know what Bible you're looking at. I know lots of people use the NIV, and the way the NIV translates this or prints it is mystery Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and of the abominations of the earth, as if mystery is part of this name that was written on her. We see the ESV, a more modern translation, a more recent one, let's say, has it not part of the name. You notice that? A name of mystery, and then colon, Babylon the Great. The NASB, similarly written, the name was written, was a mystery. And the Net Bible from Dallas Theological Seminary, my alma mater, translates it not as part of the title, but as a adjective describing the name. It's a mystery. So I won't go into the details there. Just want you to note that there's some confusion, and there's good. And if you want to read that, I'll let you pause the video and read it. But there's really good grammatical evidence that this is not part of that name. The name is not Mystery Babylon. The name is mystery, and it's going to be explained. That's what's going on in this chapter and the next. The mystery is being explained. What is Babylon all about? So, what is it all about? Throughout history, as I've been saying, it's been a literal center of rebellion against God. It begins at the Tower of Babel and goes right through the Bible, right to the end here. Has literally and figuratively not only opposed God, but persecuted the faithful. It's been the leader of the opposition against God, and source of hate and rebellion against him. So that's what we're talking about here. The mystery is identified in verse 7. It's the relationship between Babylon, the beast, and the beast's entourage. This is the mystery that's being revealed, that this city, this symbolized as a woman, has been and continues to be and will be till the end, this source of rebellion against God. Now, you might say, well, it's just a pile of bricks being rebuilt today. How can this be a source of opposition to God and his people today? Well, the idea is that what began there, what began in that city, is just spread out throughout history. It continues to spread out. Imagine throwing a stone into a still pond, and the waves from that stone hitting the water just continues to reverberate. And that's what's happening here. We're seeing the reverberation of something in our time that began in ancient times, that began in the Tower of Babel. So that's what's going on here. This mystery, this relationship is being revealed. And that's what the book of Revelation does. It doesn't make things obscure. It's here to reveal things to us. And this is what it's revealing. That the root of what we're looking at is not Iran. It's not Russia. It's not China. It's not any of these abominable nations. Those are just a symptom of a deeper disease that began to spread long ago. That's what we're looking at. And the Lord wants us to look with clarity, wants to see these things. So let's summarize this. What have we looked at in the vision here? We've seen this anti-God religious system that is dominating the world, began in Babylon, but it just continues to spread. And it's revealing this alliance between the Antichrist, his leaders, and this anti-God system. It's all one, and it's being led by this Antichrist person, the Satan behind him. It's universal. It spreads all over the world. And final judgment is coming. That's the message here, is that this whole cosmos, this whole world system is about to be overthrown in terms of Revelation. In the next couple of chapters, we're going to see the overthrow, and the overthrow happens when Jesus brings his kingdom to the earth. That's what we're seeing in the book of Revelation. Jesus is progressively bringing his kingdom to the earth. So now we'll look at the explanation in chapter verses 8 through 14. It says, the beast you saw was and is not, and is about to come up out of the abyss and go to destruction. So the angel's explaining to John, and he's recording for us. This is a message for, remember how each of those messages to the church, he who has ears to hear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. This is a message to us as well. This was and is not, is and about to, is a summary really of what we saw in Genesis 12:3, where the Antichrist is raised up, he's assassinated, apparently, he's resurrected, and he comes out of the abyss, and he's going to where Satan dwells, to hell. And that's kind of the summary there. It's pointing back to what we looked at in chapter 12. And then he says, those who dwell on the earth, whose name has not been written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, will wonder when they see the beast. So these are the earth dwellers that we've seen over and over and over again in the book of Revelation. Just talking about them on Sunday as I was going through a sermon on the church in Philadelphia. And the earth dwellers are mentioned, I think, 11 times in the book of Revelation. And they're called that because that's the whole scope of their lives. They have no spiritual sense. And in fact, they resist the Lord. And these are the people that are on the earth during the tribulation who know that the judgments are coming from the God of heaven and will not submit to him. They will not submit. The book of life he's talking about is this list of who God has chosen before creation to save. And I emphasize to save, that it will be effective. Not will have the opportunity to be saved, or not could be saved, but these are the people who will be saved. So if they are not among God's elect, they're going to have their heads turned by what they're about to see. They're going to wonder, and when they see the beast, they're going to be mesmerized by him. They're going to say, if this guy has apparently come back from the dead, we need to listen to him, see how he is the Antichrist. He is the alternative to Jesus. Talk about 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sits. So I know a lot of times people, and I think the popular explanation of this is that these seven heads or these seven hills or mountains represent the seven hills of Rome, that this um, world system is going to be in the future centered in Rome. Well, that might very well be, but not because of this verse, right? This is seven mountains, not hills. And it tells us that these are not hills, but actually even but kings. They are rulers over the earth. They are not literal mountains. So they tell us here we need to yield to that and see what it says. And the seven kings says five have fallen. And I think this is talking about the nations that came before, the empires that came before, Greece and Persia, Babylon, Assyria, and Egypt. The one is, in John's time, and I think in the future, it is Rome. But these seven kings don't all represent Rome. One does. And one is not yet come. And we're going to see that coming in a minute here before we get to the end of the chapter. There's another kingdom come, another king who's going to rule over the other kings, and he's coming. So that's what John is seeing here. Not literal mountains, but again, kings, rulers. The beast which was and is not is himself also an eighth. So this is the beast. And he's an eighth, but he's also one of the seven and goes to destruction. So that sounds a little confusing. What's going on here? So the beast's kingdom, he's saying, is an eighth kingdom, and it's composed of an alliance of the 10 horns or the 10 kings that we'll be talking about. The beast kingdom and the 10 kings are still coming. They're in the future. And they emerge, as we'll see here, just before this climactic battle, the Battle of Armageddon. So this is an alliance of these 7 kings, and they are all coming together. They're all going to be united. Verse 13, they'll have one purpose, and they give their power and authority to the beast. So verse 12, the 10 kings and the beast provide have a united single purpose. Reminds me of the men of Shinar on the plains of Babel, building the Tower of Babel. They have one purpose, and the Lord said, what will man be able to, how can we stop them, basically, if they all united together and have one purpose? So what we see is this world system that was dispersed in the book of Genesis, coming back together with this one purpose in the book of Revelation to ultimately wage resistance to the returning Jesus and us and to the church. So the beast is going to amaze the unsavable, right? The people who will not be saved, he is going to amaze them. And then we're going to have this culmination of history in this final world kingdom. And it'll be alliance. It'll be alliance among these kings under the control and influence of the Antichrist. And they are united. They're going to be united, bound together in their opposition to God in battle against Jesus at his return. So the third section here, verses 15 through 18, is about the judgment that's going to come upon them. So we see these satanically driven and satanically inspired nations and kings coming together with one purpose, one goal, wage war against the Lamb, and we'll see what happens. God has, love verse 17, God has put it in their hearts to execute his purpose. So their one purpose that they're having here is planted in their mind by God. This is an interesting combination of God's sovereignty and human will. Sometimes people call it free will, but human will and responsibility. They are going to be brought together by God, who puts it in their hearts to execute his purpose by having a common purpose. That's the means by which God is using to execute his purpose through them. So this is, again, if you look back in Isaiah chapter 10, we see God using one of the world powers at that time, one of the dominant powers in the world, Assyria, and he uses them to bring judgment on their own people. And they don't realize it. They are doing what their free will allows them to do or directs them to do. Problem with free will in fallen people is they only want to do evil. They can choose whatever they want out of a range of evil. And they choose, God puts it in their mind and directs them to do this, to oppose the coming of Christ. Even the powers of evil serve God. And let me be pastoral for a minute here. I know some of you, maybe a lot of you, have been or will or are or have or I'm sorry, have been, are now, or are going through what seems to be an attack of Satan, what seems to be evil that has been coming into your life. Could very well be, and I would nearly guarantee it, I think, that God is at work even in the evil that's come upon you. Not that God is the author of evil, but he uses evil to shape us and form us and make us more like his Son. Consider Jesus at the cross. According to God's foreknowledge, his predetermined plan, evil men put Jesus to death on the cross to fulfill God's purpose to save you and I. And God still works that way. He allows evil in the world and allows evil to touch us, not to destroy us, not to overcome us, but to make us holy, to make us more like his Son, to purify us, to make us rush to the Lord. I mean, how often do we find ourselves, and I've had this pattern myself sometimes, go into kind of a spiritual dry period, and then something happens, something unpleasant, something unplanned, and it drives me to the throne, And brothers and sisters, if that's happening to you today, let verse 17 maybe give you some insight that God uses evil to accomplish his purpose. And his purpose, according to Ephesians 1:3, is to make you holy and blameless. So take heart. God is at work in your lives, even in the difficult times. Well, let's go on here. As I alluded to, this is really the paradox of God's sovereignty. A lot of people stumble over this, I think. Although the beasts and the kings are choosing freely, right, as far as they're concerned, they're choosing freely to come together, to make a plan, to attack, to try to keep the Messiah from coming. They are held accountable for their actions because that's what their evil heart is leading them to do. You know, the fulfillment of God's purposes are never in doubt. So some people would say that, well, you know, God just intervenes at certain points in history and causes things to happen in order to bring about his prophetic word. And let me suggest that you know, God is consistent, right? God is not sovereign sometimes and not sovereign others. God doesn't have sovereignty for himself sometimes and delegates sovereignty to men at others. No, he is very consistent. He is always sovereign. And we see that not only in what he's doing here at the end of book of Revelation, but we see that from the beginning, from the beginning of the church, that God is sovereign not only over judgment, but over salvation. When the Gentiles heard this, that is, when they heard the gospel, they began rejoicing and glorifying the word of the Lord. And look at this. as many as had been appointed to eternal life believed. Again, not as many as been appointed to eternal life had the opportunity to believe, or had the choice to believe, or had the chance to believe. No, they believed. When God predestined them, when God appointed them to eternal life, it was effective. They were going to be saved. That's what he's doing here. And that's God's sovereignty. And we can't ignore that. And as people who believe that God fulfills prophecy, it's unavoidable that God has got to be sovereign, and he's got to be completely sovereign in order for his prophetic word to come to pass. So if we summarize this last section here, we see this alliance of the Antichrist and the 10 kings are going to turn on the worldwide religious system symbolized by the woman. That's what's going to happen here. They're going to be drawn together. They are going to have this kingdom for a short time until the words of God are going to be fulfilled. And then the alliance itself will turn around and be destroyed by the returning Jesus and the church. We'll see that as we go through this. And everything, this is all according to God's sovereign will and predetermined decree. This is happening, verse 17 tells us, according to the word of God, according to exactly what he predicted through the prophets, through the covenants. These things are all going to come to pass. So what? Right? Good. This is good, Dan. I understand. It's getting clear to me now. So what? Well, a couple things we could take away from this is, number one, brothers and sisters, be confident. Be confident that God's purposes are right now being worked out and will be worked out in the future. His comprehensive purposes and plans, from the salvation of those around us, people in our family that we've been praying for so long, their salvation, as well as the coming of the kingdom. It's all going to be accomplished, and God has determined how that salvation and how that kingdom is going to come. He has determined that. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. That's God's will. God's will guarantees every prophecy of the Bible will be fulfilled. Every prophecy. Also, human freedom guarantees that sinners are held accountable for their actions. You know, sinners want to sin. That's their characteristic. When the Spirit of God regenerates you, you are suddenly interested in being holy. It might start out as a faint call, but it grows and grows in your life. If you've been walking with the Lord for a long time, you know what I'm talking about. If you're a new believer or a relatively new believer, you can expect that call to holiness to continue to grow in your life. Some people sometimes call it the hound of heaven gets after you. He doesn't leave you alone. He pursues you and won't let you alone. Grace guarantees that the elect will be saved. Again, people disagree on that. We can disagree and still be friends. That's fine. But I'll tell you that God's election is, I think what the Bible says is begins in eternity past, and it's effective for every person that's elect. That means that as long as the church is in the world, as long as Romans 11:25 says that until the last Gentile is pulled into the church, that there are people that are going to be saved, that God knows who they are. You don't, I don't. What we're called to do is just share the gospel with confidence and expectation. Let me also say that, like me, many of you have family members who you have been praying for a long, long time, let's just say. Well, that that persistence in prayer is from the Lord. That's the Holy Spirit working in you to encourage you and lead you and draw you to be praying for them. And that is not an accident. God is going to use your prayers in their lives. So continue to pray for them. Don't give up. Remember, God's purposes are being worked out. That includes not only bringing the kingdom to the earth, but the election of the salvation of his elect, of his saints. So even if you don't agree with me on the election and salvation, at least agree with me that the Lord wants you to pray for the unsaved and continue to pray and not give up. So God bless you, brothers and sisters. I hope this was useful for you. I hope it was clear. And I pray that this would have educated, edified, encouraged you, and you'll find this useful in your own Christian walk. God bless you.